Last evening, there was a little incident that took place that I think typifies the kind of man he is. He was sitting in one of our fine Provo restaurants, and as he and I were sitting and talking, he interrupted for just a moment and called the waitress over and said, "Waitress, excuse me, but you've served me something here I can't eat." And she said, "Oh, really? What's that?" He reached down into his soup with his spoon and pulled out the tin can lid. And he was apologizing for saying anything about it. Well, this is the kind of man he is. He's intelligent, he's sensitive, he's feeling of all of those around him. And I think this is a side of him that not enough of us know. Truly, we are privileged this evening to have as our speaker Eldridge Cleaver.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
With founders Huey and Bobby in jail, a new and provocative leader emerges, Eldridge Cleaver. His best-selling book of prison writings, Soul on Ice, has made him a media sensation.
Eldridge Cleaver became a pop icon. He was a best-selling author. He was an ex-convict who admitted that he was in prison for rape. He was crazy, but brilliant at the same time.
This is a combination that people weren't quite prepared for. But his attitude was, ready or not, here we come.
We are not in a mind to sit around to observe this and to build monuments to Huey or to sing songs about Huey. We will go down with Huey.
Eldridge and his wife Kathleen together stepped forward as the primary spokespeople for the party.
All power to the people!
If Eldridge was the minister of information, she was the mistress of information. She became like the spokeswoman of the Black Panther Party.
Eldridge Cleaver is the information minister of the Black Panthers and presidential candidate a while ago on the Peace and Freedom Party. Mr. Cleaver is extremely popular among the extremely dissatisfied in America, and although he makes much of the fact of his blackness, in fact he has apparently much more support among dissatisfied American whites than blacks, and no doubt Mr. Cleaver will in due course explain why this should be so. He grew up in Arizona and California. In due course and after much deliberation, he chose criminal vocations, first as a trader in marijuana, for which he was arrested and served time as a juvenile delinquent, and then, when he was a little older, as a rapist specializing in white victims. He was caught and sent to jail on a 14-year sentence, of which he has served 9 years before getting bail. While in jail, he educated himself and wrote the bestseller Soul on Ice, which is a catechism of sorts on Mr. Cleaver's personal ideology, which he defends most militantly as a Black Panther outspokenly engaged in revolutionary activity, the purpose of which is to change the face of America. I should like to begin by asking Mr. Cleaver whether he finds it consistent with his ideology to encourage the assassination of Mr. Richard Nixon. I mean, he is the chief pig, isn't he?
Richard Nixon is, at this moment, the pig waiting in the wings to take the place of the other pig that's on his way out. I would say that if Richard Nixon was assassinated, it would only result in having another pig in line who possibly would need to be assassinated. If anyone wanted to assassinate Richard Nixon, I wouldn't do anything to stop him. Not on camera, but maybe behind closed doors where I wouldn't be prosecuted for it. perhaps I would encourage that. I don't see any reason for having Richard Nixon alive today.
April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King is assassinated in Memphis. Riots explode in over 100 cities across America. Cleaver sees the moment of black revolution as having arrived.
We say, bring it on. If you want war, let there be war. This is what we're saying. Is that clear?
On the night of April 6th, he appears in Oakland with an armed caravan of Panthers, including 17-year-old Bobby Hutton, the party's first recruit.
In a shootout with police, Hutton had holed up in this basement with Eldridge Cleaver, the party's Minister of Information. Cleaver came out of the house stark naked, defenseless. Hutton ran, police said, and died.
I would trust my attorney's words, you dig? When Charles R. Gary tells me to come back and go to trial, I'll catch the first plane out of here and go to trial. And if I can come back there that way, then that's cool. Not because I think that I would get any justice in the courts, because it's very clear. It's very clear what the pigs have in store for niggas like me. Look at what happened to Bobby Seale in Chicago, how the pigs bound and gagged him, shackled him like a slave. But we have to blow their game, and we have to take advantage of every opportunity to strike a blow against this system. At 8:30 in the morning on November the 27th, I was supposed to surrender to my parole officer, and he was going to transport me to San Quentin State Prison. He was going to transfer me there because I had been charged by the Alameda County Grand Jury with several violations of the law. I pleaded not guilty to the indictment, but my parole officer and those who control him, specifically the California Department of Corrections, the Adult Authority, they couldn't wait for the case to come to trial. So that on the basis of merely being charged with these crimes, they used that fact to violate my parole, to revoke my parole and order me returned to prison. I took a dim view of that.
Good evening. Just days ago, the San Francisco PD swooped down on a group of guys they wanted real bad. They've been after them for more than 35 years, when a killing spree ignited San Francisco in one of the wildest and most turbulent times in the city's history. It's been 35 years in the making. This moment caught on tape by America's Most Wanted.
Hey, Richard, you cop killer?
This former radical and San Francisco city janitor now under arrest for conspiracy to kill a San Francisco cop. The story goes back to San Francisco in the late 1960s. The center of anti-war protesters and those fighting for civil rights. The establishment, especially cops, were considered the enemy.
We had a sergeant who was killed by a pipe bomb that was lodged outside the station. And that was the first we saw that there is real violence and terrorism that was pointed towards police officers.
And it wouldn't be the last. 5 officers were murdered in a 20-month period. They were even targeted while paying their respects to a fallen officer when a bomb went off before his funeral.
This was anarchy. This was really the first of guerrilla warfare that we started seeing in San Francisco.
After 7 years as a fugitive, one-time Black Panther leader Eldridge Cleaver arrived at Kennedy Airport in New York early this evening and was immediately arrested by FBI agents. His return from France wasn't easy. He got caught in Paris traffic on the way to the airport, and then his flight was delayed 3 hours when another airliner went off the runway. Eldridge Cleaver's return to the United States is the subject of Eric Severide's commentary.
Mr. Eldridge Cleaver never understood America because he never understood himself. Now he understands both. So the ex-revolutionist, fugitive from justice, who fled abroad 7 years ago, has now fled several foreign countries, including communist ones, and back to the United States. He discovered that he was not an African, but a black American. He discovered that communism, in spite of a new rationale and new techniques, is the oldest of all systems, tyranny. He now prefers prison in the United States. What it means is that all the years he was violently and consciously protesting life in this country, his unconscious self felt at home here. He had said his soul was on ice here, to use the title of his book. Abroad, he found himself in the deep freeze. He sounds entirely honest about all this. He admits that his ideas have changed. He does argue also that things have changed in the United States in these 7 years, making it possible for him to receive justice from authority. Things have not changed that much, and it was always possible. Nearly every one of the violent protesters that the system could not give them justice, including Angela Davis, received justice, acquittals, in fact. He thinks the status of black Americans has fundamentally changed, that the American society has cleansed itself of evils like Watergate. He also accepts the cliche that nations get the leadership they deserve, a curious proposition. A bad president is sometimes elected, and then 4 years later a good president, while the nation has not changed at all. And few would argue that the farmers, mechanics, and tradesmen who inhabited the eastern seaboard 200 years are so exceptional that they deserve the extraordinary leadership of the Founding Fathers, a group without equal in centuries. These are the accidents of history, but cycles there do seem to be, and Cleaver may have possession of a deeper insight than most of us when he says now that for American democracy, a fabulous new era of progress is opening up, a creative era. The ghost of Alfred North Whitehead might agree. That formidable intellect once said that every truly creative period in history has been accompanied by or immediately preceded by not only conflict, but violent conflict. An observation about the past, not a guarantee about the future.